The streets of Rome pulsed with excitement long before Julius Caesar's legions appeared at the city's edge. Word of his triumphs in Gaul had traveled faster than the soldiers themselves. Tales of impossible victories, daring strategies, and the general who inspired unwavering loyalty. As dawn broke, citizens crowded every balcony, rooftop, and marketplace, eager to witness the return of the man many now hailed as Rome's greatest hero. When Caesar finally entered the city, the thunder of thousands of boots hitting the stone echoed through the capital. Golden standards glimmered in the sunlight, decorated with symbols of conquered lands. Trumpets blared triumphantly, announcing not just the end of a campaign, but the arrival of a man who had reshaped the boundaries of the Republic. Caesar rode at the front, calm yet commanding, acknowledging the cheers with a measured grace that only intensified the crowd's admiration. To the people, he was a savior, someone who fed them, entertained them, and expanded Rome's glory. But not everyone celebrated. Deep within the Senate chambers, powerful men watched the festivities with troubled eyes. Caesar's victories had brought him wealth, fame, and an army fiercely devoted to him rather than to Rome. His growing popularity threatened the balance of power the Senate desperately clung to. Figures like Cato, Cicero, and even Pompey, once Caesar's ally, could sense the shifting winds. A man beloved by the masses and backed by legions was no mere politician. He was a force capable of remaking the Republic in his own image. As the celebrations continued outside, a quiet tension began to weave through the political heart of Rome. Caesar's triumphant return marked more than a hero's homecoming. It signaled the beginning of a transformation that would test the limits of Rome's traditions, loyalties, and future. In the months following Caesar's celebrated return, Rome's political landscape shifted with a subtle but unmistakable tremor. The triumvirate that had once bound Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus together had long since frayed. With Crassus dead in Parthia, the delicate balance between the remaining two titans collapsed, exposing deep rivalries that had been concealed beneath years of cooperation. Pompey, once Caesar's trusted partner and even father-in-law, found himself drawn toward the Senate's camp, a camp increasingly alarmed by Caesar's rising influence. As public adoration for Caesar swelled, Pompey's prestige seemed to dim by comparison. Though still a respected general, he sensed the people's affections drifting toward his rival. Senators seized this opportunity, whispering in Pompey's ear that he alone could protect the Republic from Caesar's ambition. They painted Caesar as a man intoxicated by victory, one who might soon crown himself king. Pompey's pride, already wounded by Caesar's meteoric rise, made him receptive to their fears. He began to view Caesar not as a colleague, but as a looming threat. Meanwhile, Caesar's reforms and generosity to the common people only widened the divide. His grain distribution, land settlements for veterans, and public games strengthened his bond with the masses but deepened the Senate's suspicion. Their demands grew urgent. Caesar must relinquish command of his army and return to Rome as a private citizen. But Caesar knew the danger of such a submission. Without the protection of his legions, he could be prosecuted or stripped of everything he had fought for. As winter settled over the Italian countryside, tension curdled into open hostility. Letters flew between Rome and Caesar's camp, each one sharpening the conflict. And then, with a single decisive order from the Senate demanding he disband his forces, the fragile peace shattered. Caesar faced a choice: submit to his enemies, or march on Rome. The Republic braced for the storm to come. The civil war that followed Caesar's fateful march on Rome reshaped the Republic with brutal speed. Pompey's forces, though formidable, crumbled under the relentless precision of Caesar's legions. After the decisive victory at Pharsalus, Caesar pursued his rival across the Mediterranean, only to learn that Pompey had been murdered in Egypt by courtiers hoping to gain Caesar's favor. Yet the sight of Pompey's severed head brought him no satisfaction, only a grim reminder of how far Rome had fallen into chaos. Returning to Rome after a string of victories, Caesar found himself welcomed not just as a conqueror but as a stabilizing force. The Senate, diminished and divided, granted him unprecedented authority, first as dictator for 10 days, then for a year, and eventually for 10. Each appointment was justified by crisis, food shortages, economic turmoil, ongoing wars, but the effect was unmistakable. Power, once diffused among many, was gathering in the hands of one. Caesar embraced his authority with sweeping reforms. He expanded the Senate, reorganized provincial governance, revised the calendar, and launched ambitious construction projects to employ thousands. To many Romans, these changes were long overdue. The Republic had been paralyzed for decades by corruption and stagnation. Caesar's decisiveness felt like a cure. But beneath this veneer of order, unease grew. Traditionalists watched with mounting alarm as Caesar's influence expanded beyond the old boundaries. His new Senate was filled with loyalists. His image appeared on coins, an honor once reserved for the gods. Rumors whispered through marble corridors. Did he intend to make himself king? When Caesar accepted the title, dictator for life, the whispers turned to fear. What had begun as a temporary measure to rescue Rome now looked, to his enemies, like the blueprint of a monarchy. And for a republic born from the rejection of kings, this was a line too dangerous to cross. A reckoning was coming. Winter dissolved into spring, but the air in Rome was far from warm. It hung thick with rumors that Julius Caesar's power had reached a point beyond return. His enemies watched uneasily as he accepted honor after honor, culminating in the title Dictator Perpetuo, dictator for life. To Caesar's supporters, it was a symbol of stability, a guarantee that Rome would not fall back into chaos. To the traditionalists, it was the final crack in the Republic's fragile foundation. Inside shadowed atriums and secluded gardens, a group of senators began to gather in secret. These were men who disagreed on nearly everything: politics, ambition, ideology, yet found rare unity in their fear of Caesar's growing dominance. They called themselves liberatores, believing they acted in the name of freedom. At their center stood two figures: Cassius, sharp-edged and resentful of Caesar's power, and Brutus, thoughtful, admired, and burdened by a moral weight that grew heavier by the day. Brutus loved the Republic, and Caesar loved Brutus like a son. That bond made him the most valuable, and reluctant, conspirator. As the plot took shape, omens rippled through Rome. Strange lights flickered in the sky. A lioness roamed the capital. Caesar's wife, Calpurnia, awoke trembling from nightmares of his blood spilling across her arms. She begged him not to attend the Senate session scheduled for March 15th. For a moment, Caesar listened. But a lifetime of defying fate had made him stubborn, and the reassurance of a conspirator, ironically one involved in the plot, persuaded him to go. The Senate house buzzed with forced politeness when Caesar arrived. Cloaks shifted, eyes locked, steps approached. Then the first blade flashed. Chaos erupted as the conspirators struck again and again. Caesar, stunned and bleeding, turned to see Brutus among them. The betrayal shattered him more than the wounds. Et tu, Brute. With those words, the dictator collapsed at the foot of Pompey's statue, killed beneath the shadow of his former rival. Rome had been freed, or so the conspirators believed. When the final echoes of Caesar's death faded from the Senate chamber, the conspirators stepped forward believing they had saved Rome. They expected cheers, a swelling tide of gratitude from a people freed from tyranny. Instead, a strange and heavy silence gripped the city. The citizens who had adored Caesar did not erupt in celebration. They recoiled in confusion, fear, and grief. Rome had lost not only a leader, but the one man many believed capable of holding the fractured republic together. The conspirators attempted to justify their deed, proclaiming themselves liberators. But their speeches fell flat. The people saw only blood on their hands, not patriotism. Without Caesar's authority, old rivalries resurfaced like cracks in shattered marble. Factions formed overnight, streets thrummed with uncertainty, and into this volatile landscape stepped Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal friend and master of political theater. At Caesar's funeral, Antony turned the tide. His eulogy, filled with grief and fiery rhetoric, transformed public shock into fury. He revealed Caesar's will, which generously gifted land and money to Roman citizens. The crowd erupted, no longer passive mourners but an enraged force. They hunted the conspirators, burning homes and chasing them from Rome. Brutus and Cassius fled east to raise armies of their own, preparing for a reckoning. Meanwhile, a new figure emerged from the shadows of Caesar's legacy, Gaius Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir. Young, calculating, and underestimated, he formed an uneasy alliance with Antony and Lepidus, creating the Second Triumvirate. Together, they unleashed proscriptions, lists of enemies marked for death, turning Rome into a city of fear and vengeance. The final act unfolded on distant battlefields, where Antony and Octavian crushed Brutus and Cassius. But the republic they fought to defend was already dying. Within a few short years, Octavian would seize absolute power as Augustus, Rome's first emperor. The republic had not been saved by Caesar's death. It had been extinguished by it.